Okay, welcome back. It's late October 1864, where we left off. It's been a little while since the last video. A part of that has been actually because I've loaded the game up a couple of times, and I've just kind of installing. Each time I've looked at it and thought, well, you know, we've kind of done what we set out to do, which is to take Vienna a second time, and to sort of, you know, drive a sort of stake really into the heart of the Austrians. And now I'm confronted with the stark reality that I have to kind of hold it, and there's lots of kind of possibilities. I mean, we do have a stockpile of supplies in Vienna, not a really large one, but enough that we can draw on for maybe a month or so. And we do need a lot of force concentration of Vienna, and in this short term anyway, because the Austrians have assembled fairly substantial forces, and I think it's going to be a lively round in Vienna. I think the Austrians are going to push it hard, and yeah, it's going to be really touch and go. The hope is that the fact that national morale has bottomed out of the Austrian Empire, I think they're sitting at around 5 national morale, will have significant repercussions in terms of the combat worthiness of their forces, but that remains to be seen. In the short term, for the next fortnight, we're going to hold our position. We're going to hold Mehmed Ali Pasha in a defensive posture. Hussein Avni Pasha is going to hold an offensive posture with a view to clear the remaining forces from the district. These are mostly fortress troops. But also there's an army corps, Austrian army corps, under Bizak, remaining outside Vienna. We're going to begin the construction also of a fortress in Vienna. The reason being is we intend to stay in Vienna for a period of time. So yeah, we're going to be here for a good 6 months or so. The idea is we don't abandon it. We will destroy the fortress and the depot. Not that the depot really matters because it's a large city, but we'll destroy the fortress when we cut a peace deal. So it's a kind of, you know, it's a short-term outlay. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's just going to give us a bit of a defensive advantage. It will take time for the fortress to complete construction, but over a period of time, it doesn't just happen in a kind of, you know, overnight, turning on a light bulb. Gradually, the fortress will kind of become complete, and it'll be able to muster some garrison forces and stuff like that. Even though there was a possibility of moving one of the forces south and they can still conduct a supporting role, I want casualties to be fairly evenly distributed in the first engagements. To that end, they're going to try and keep both commands in Vienna, and then once we've kind of dealt with the initial onslaught, we'll look to press a force south. The difficulty here is also we don't yet have control over the Dalmatian coastline proper. There's still Austrian forces in theatre. There's a reasonably large Austrian force to the south, Karl Ferdinand's corps. And then also there's a pretty large Austrian force comprised of 4 or 5 army corps to the north besieging the Russians at Fiume. So we need to consolidate this position before we really, press north. So the idea is we hope that these supplies will last a month or so, at least a month. And I think they should. I mean, we've only just taken Vienna, so it will take a bit of time for those supplies to filter really into the army commands. The army commands themselves are quite low on supply, but they can draw on supply from Vienna. That's the hope. In the short term, we're also going to keep Bezi Pasha. We're going to keep it in an offensive posture, and we're going to look to kind of clear the district of Dalmatia out. We're going to bring the transport fleet back. I think we'll bring it back to Smyrna. And we have one army corps complete, which is sitting at Smyrna, and that's going to be joining Bezi Pasha's force on the Dalmatian coastline. 25 days, you know, yeah, nothing we can do about that. We're going to keep the fleet just sat off the coast for the time being. We'll keep them actually in a shore bombardment role to provide support for Bezi Pasha. We've got a cavalry division in Eskişehir, which is it's not complete yet, so that's going to be probably complete in a fortnight. Then it's going to take a month or so to move to the Dalmatian coast. The thing we have to keep in mind is that Bezi Pasha's force is a partially assembled force. It's not completely assembled, so we want to try and get force concentration. But we, you know, it's a sort of it's the trade-off really between fast mobile operations that can achieve dazzling results, and then the kind of cold tap of facts, supplies, and logistics. So these things are a bit often at odds. You know, it's a sort of was it Guderian or someone that said that, you know, logistics is the kind of ball and chain of warfare, and I think that very much is the case. And we need to try and, if we're going to hold Vienna and really the Central Empire for a period of time, we need to be able to set up a logistics sort of line of communication to Vienna. But I think a fortnight to a month we should be okay. That's pretty much it. That's the moves we're going to make. One thing that we have, we've got a report of a rebellion that's broken out in the interior in Cyrenaica. We're using all of our kind of riverine movement points for this turn, for this fortnight. I think probably in early November we'll look to move this force, the Tripoli division, to Benghazi, to begin to look to deal with the Senussi raiders in the interior. That's pretty much it. We're 2 turns away from colonial status in Kuwait. We're trying to play another colonial card, which is military expedition pacifier. That gives us, that can give us, well, it'll give us an additional 2% colonial penetration. We're sitting at 46, so we need that to work twice, basically. That doesn't always, it's like flipping a coin in terms of whether or not that works. It requires military forces in the area. But once we're sitting at above 40% colonial penetration, in terms of our inventory, in terms of the kind of instruments that we have with regard to, achieving greater colonial penetration, that's pretty much the only one that we have. So it's once we get, to around 40%, it's quite difficult for us to drive colonial penetration up. Once we've built roads and things like that, there it becomes rather tricky. So the Yemen is pacified. We're going to continue to sort of play colonial cards here, consolidate the position, and there's a good chance that Yemen can be pushed over to colonial status. One thing I realized actually, and that is that Gadea, that's actually not a part of Yemen. So colonial definitions and status shows that this area, this is the colonial region of Yemen, this is actually a part of Oman, which is interesting. We can't play any colonial cards there, so we're basically military occupying a region of Oman. I don't know why. I guess because it was under the control of rebels, brigands, or something like this. So we were sort of able to take control of it. We're going to keep a force there for the time being, but I think ultimately we'll look to vacate this region. But it's only on the basis, really, that the Omanis can actually provide some meaningful security. We don't want this to be an open door to kind of raiders from the interior, from the Arabian Peninsula. That's it. Economic administration is set. We've had a pretty good round economically. One thing I have noticed is that we're looking at declining private revenue, but we're not actually shifting less goods. We're actually shifting slightly more goods in the national market. But I guess it's just a kind of tendency of the rate of profit to fall, that kind of thing. It's I guess as prices begin to gradually depress, the amount of revenue that we generate is slightly diminished, but it's not significant. Exports are, however, up. Our export market is really, really climbing, and imports, generally speaking, we've got a really good trade balance. We are a bit of an industrial powerhouse. We're a big agricultural exporter also, and that's really good. One of the areas that we're really going to be looking to exploit in our next kind of phase of industrial development, as well as looking to develop the interior with regard to industry, we do have the parts of the interior now linked up with railroads, is we're going to be looking to exploit opium. And that is a resource we've got really good access to now. We've got access to it in Yemen, small amount of access in Anatolia, which we've already exploited, but also quite a lot of naturally occurring opium in Zanzibar. If we can exploit and develop this properly with railroads and plantations, we've got the construction of a plantation in Zanzibar at the moment, then we could be looking to set ourselves up as a major opium exporter. Another tile in Mogadishu, we're getting a really good presence in Somalia. With all of these areas properly developed, long term, we will be a serious opium player. I mean, we will be exporting. In terms of opium exports, let's have a look. Where's the opium? No, that's cotton. Yeah. So the biggest opium export at the moment is Central America. They can shift 7 units in a fortnight. I don't know if they can do that consistently. Demand far outstrips supply. We could easily. I mean, at the moment we produce 4 units, but that's meeting domestic consumption. If we can really exploit this opium, we could be, the principal opium exporter in the world, and just kind of sit back like Tony Montana and enjoy the profits as they roll in. So opium is really, really good. It's a high yield kind of cash crop. As well as opium, we're going to be looking at coffee also. We're not going to be a big coffee heavyweight, I don't think, but certainly we can produce enough coffee to probably be an exporter. Not a big exporter, but could be interesting. It's going to be on the basis of pushing railroads down through the Hejaz ultimately, though, and linking up Yemen and really developing this region, bringing this into colonial status also. Also Zanzibar. Zanzibar is a protectorate now. So yeah, it is a protectorate, yeah. And we've got 40% colonial penetration. So these drive colonial penetration up, find another 10% basically, and then we're kind of in business. It's got roads. What kind of cards can we play there? Yeah, nothing else really. We need to get a small security force there also, actually. Let's check revolt risk. Yeah, it's not low. It's... Okay, it's not high, actually. It's not too high at all. But nevertheless, we do need to get a small security force there at some point. That would also help with the colonial penetration, because we can play kind of sort of suppression cards, which will increase our colonial penetration. That's pretty much it for late October then. Got to put you on pause, past turn. And yeah, we're going to face the music. As I say, I put this off continuously and just thought, what do I do? But I'm going to kind of err on the side of caution for the next fortnight. Not going to do anything. We've just taken Vienna. It will take time for those supplies to trickle into the commands. So the supply situation, in theory, isn't as bad as it looks because they can draw on the supplies in Vienna. It's just that there's not nearly as many supplies. I thought Vienna would be flush with military supplies. That might suggest something about the supply situation of the Austrians. The Austrians are a supply importer. When we, in the first war with the Austrians, we destroyed all their military factories, and they've not managed to rebuild them, surprisingly. I thought they would have by now. So, I mean, they have a few factories, but textile factories, yeah, just textile factories. I think they have some factories in Trieste also. And that produces a small amount of supply, but no munitions. So they have to import this stuff, That eats into their private capital. Having to import all the manufactured goods, your military supplies and stuff like that, it suppresses your, ability to grow your economy, because all of your private capital, your liquidity is tied up with these things, And, so they're probably spending a huge amount of money importing sort of munitions and stuff like this. But anyway, going to be on pause, past turn, and we'll pick up in early November. So see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back. Early November then, and we passed turn, and yeah, it was a pretty big round. What we kind of thought might happen is exactly what happened. So first of all, first engagement is just Bayezid Pasha clearing the Dalmatian coastline. We had to really sit in tight. It's a partially formed force that he has. It's not really enough to kind of do anything too crazy. We need to kind of assemble. He's waiting on a call. That's 10 days away in the Adriatic. We've got to quickly check on the cavalry division that's being constructed. That's not complete yet. It's probably going to be a month to 6 weeks away. The really big engagement then is at Vienna, and it is huge. The Austrians they throw the kitchen sink at it. They end up getting something like 427,000 men into the region, and their force is devastated. We absolutely smash them. We inflict like 136,000 casualties. It's not cheap. We take 50,000 casualties. It's a big engagement. They outnumber us 2-1, but yeah, their force is devastated. We take 16,000 prisoners, and it's a four-round action. In the event, by the looks of it, we destroy an entire army corps also. So it's a big win for us. And it looks like the remainder of that force is headed north and is inside the fortress at Maren, and that's been kind of joined by some Bavarians. They might go again. Their force has taken some heavy casualties, but there's a good chance they go again. One thing that I have noticed is I was kind of checking the areas around Vienna, is they have begun a crash mobilization program. You can see army corps left, right, and center that are at 0 strength. These are not army corps, I don't think, that have been damaged or in combat. I think these are corps that have been constructed. Yeah, lots of forces. I think they're pretty much, bringing everything they can, really, all the resources they can muster to try and rebuild their army. An army corps also in Prague. So they're on a crash building program. It's the weakest we've seen Austria, I think, since sort of 1850. But yeah, we destroyed a large part of their force. They've still got a reasonable army just north of Vienna, and we need to have a bit of a think about what we're going to do. They destroyed the railroad also in Vienna. They still have fortress troops in theatre. I think what we're going to do is Hussein Avenue. We're going to put him inside the fortress this time around. His force seems to take the lion's share of the casualties. He can still be brought to bear, but the Ahmed Pasha is really going to do the lion's share of the fighting for the next kind of month. And what we're going to do after this, we're going to just really hold. I'm tempted to kind of do it this turn. I think they're going to make another big push though, but I think after that, once we defeat them again, we're going to conduct assault. Budo, we're basically going to destroy these forces whilst they're being assembled. To hit them in the assembly ground. So we're going to move to Buda, we're going to move a force into Marburg, destroy whatever's there, Graz, and we're going to try and create a bit of elbow room, start creating a bit of elbow room to the south, and this will allow us then to link up with Bayezid Pasha's force. He'll move north to Zagreb and open up a line of communication. But yeah, the key thing is we're going to have to try and destroy these forces while they're being assembled. A big win, but certainly the Austrians still have fight. I mean, if they're able to inflict 50,000 casualties, it's not like their army has suddenly become completely useless. Now, the really large force that was besieging the Russians at Fiume, I think they've moved this south. I think that is this force under Karamgaras. I may be wrong, but it appears to be. I mean, they've removed this force from Fiume. This is a number of army corps. It's not clear where these forces are. So my hunch is that they've sort of headed south. This is really where, for one, the presence of the British is going to pay off, but also all these investments into large fortresses in the Balkans. It means they're not going to be able to take any victory locations. They're going to be besieging these fortresses for years. You know, they've been besieging Constanta for some time already with a fairly substantial force. And I mean, that still has ample supplies, but we do need to start thinking about lifting the siege there, and ultimately we're going to start thinking about conducting an offensive into sort of Transylvania. The problem is we don't want to kind of throw ourselves off balance here. We've got a nice strong position in Bucharest. They have large forces still, probably they've been kind of bringing down from the Russian front into Moldavia. It looks like they actually, looking at the combat reports, they tried to move a force into Wallachia, but then they backed out. They just realised that they weren't in a position to conduct a serious offensive. What we are going to do, however, is going to be Rita Pasha into Constanta. It's a 5-day march. We're going to set it to offensive posture, and he's going to conduct an offensive to try and lift the siege at Constanta. He will be supported by Abdulkarim Nadir and Ahmed Pasha and Wallachia, but we're going to maintain this position for the time being. Once the right flank is cleared, we can kind of wheel round. We can't move into Moldavia, but we can look at maybe conducting a siege at Constanta. That's pretty much it. There's nothing that we can still do, really. We need to try and get Bayezid Pasha's force assembled so that he can do some kind of serious work. I mean, that corps is about to land. The problem is, if that corps lands, we move Bayezid Pasha north, and then Karl Ferdinand moves north, he's going to completely maul that corps, which we do not want, really, you know. So we're going to try and get a bit of force concentration before we actually... I mean, keep in mind that Bayezid Pasha is not even activated this turn. It's not like we can do anything, really. I mean, he can move very slowly, for example, towards Bihać, but it makes sense to assemble our force. We're in early November. The weather is still fairly clement, so it's probably going to be, you know, a kind of late winter. I would imagine there's not even heavy rainfall, so probably the weather's colder, but it's for the most part clear and it's not wet, so forces can still move at reasonable speed. This appears to be the case through most of the Balkans anyway, for the time being. Transport fleet's on its way back, 2 days away. Cavalry division's not yet complete, and the third corps of the Bayezid Pasha's army is 10 days from landing on the Dalmatian coastline. That is pretty much it. That's all we're going to do. Now, the purpose of putting Hossein Avni into the fortress is, for one, he can receive replacements a little bit better, if he's able to do that, of course. His lines of communication are destroyed, but some of these forces will return anyway because they're just wounded. You know, we take casualties. We took 50,000 casualties. It doesn't mean 50,000 men die. It just means that we take 50,000 casualties. Getting inside the fortress enables the kind of the field hospital unit to do maybe slightly more effective work a bit more quickly and press some of these men back into service. This force is still set to defensive posture, so it can still wade in on anything that happens in Vienna district. He can still provide support to Mehmed Ali Pasha, but we want Mehmed Ali Pasha's force to take the brunt of the casualties in the next round, because Hussein Avni's force has suffered very heavy casualties. Virtually all of those 50,000 goes into his force, and his army is only about 80,000 strong. So we've got 2 army corps that are stripped to the bone, a cavalry division that's been fairly badly hit. It looks like the 2 light regiments are the ones that were worst hit. The Imperial Guard is not bad, but it's at about half strength. So Hussein Avni is going to sit in Vienna for the next fortnight, see if we can get some of those boys back into the line. And Mehmed Ali Pasha is going to hold position in Vienna district. That's pretty much it. That's all the combat moves we're going to make. So next turn, possibly another big engagement at Vienna, but it's likely there's going to be a big battle at Constanta unless the Austrians just pull back, basically. Congratulations to Bayezid Pasha and Namik Pasha. Namik Pasha is in command of the... Is he Imperial? No, Sufet. Okay, so he must be in command of one of the forces in Hussein Avni. So he's in command of the Imperial Guard then. So yeah, he gets a thumbs up. That's good. And his stock rises, new seniority of 22. Good round economically, actually. Really good round economically. I mean, looking at the number of goods sold in the national markets, 219. That might be a record in terms of overall quantity, but only yielding 651. That confirms my suspicion that we're actually shifting more goods, but probably with a greater availability of certain kinds of goods. For example, we've, in the last 6 months, fairly significantly increased our capacity to produce luxury goods. That depresses the price a little bit on the domestic market as these things become more available. So we see a little bit of a kind of plateauing in terms of private revenue turnover, but we're still shifting more goods. Exports, not a great round for exports. Not terrible, just not great. Imports 19 for 38, so decent round. Administration has been set. I'm going to really quickly check through it just to make sure I'm not missing anything. And I'm not. We've got good state revenue. We are sitting at 1,800. Private capital. We could actually build something, but what do we need? Now we've got an opium plantation being put in Zanzibar. The second one is 630. We might as well we could just do the second one, straight off the bat, sort of thing. Yeah, let's do it. That leaves us just a little over 1,000. This gems field is turning out 1 unit per turn. The railroad's going into Basra and Kuwait, linking up Baghdad through Kut. Okay, so the colonial card failed, which was sort of anticipated. We'll play it again. We're probably not too far off protectorate status for Somalia, 225 plus a diplomat. Now, Somalia, this is Somaliland, this is Somalia. Yeah, we're not quite yet the dominant colonial power. We're still kind of competing with. We need to basically properly supplant Piedmont, Sardinia. Piedmont, Sardinia can't get anything consistent here. They can't get any structures because they keep getting destroyed. And Piedmont, Sardinia is not in a position to project any military strength onto the Horn of Africa, whereas of course we are, which is good. But yeah, we're not there yet. What have we got here? Mission. Got a trade station, opium in Mogadishu. I think we'll leave as is for the time being. We want to try and build up a little bit of a kind of head start in state revenue and try and push it up to 500. And Zanzibar is a possible candidate for kind of, I mean, it's already a protectorate, but it's a little way off. We did 50 colonial penetration for colony. I think the next kind of colonial status is going to be kind of Qatar. I gather then, I didn't actually see that, but Omani pirates, Omanese pirates, okay. We'll move the Gulf fleet down into the Persian Gulf. Right, that's it for this turn. I'm going to pass turn and we'll pick up in late November. I'm just double checking, make sure I haven't forgotten anything. So it's probably going to be another defensive round in Vienna. Supplies have held in Vienna, and it looks like some of them actually trickled into Hussein Afni's force. So yeah, the supply situation isn't as bad as it looks. My worry was that sort of, you know, in the next turn, Vienna would kind of empty out of supplies and our forces would be, you know, they would pretty much be on the clock then. But by the looks of it, we're not too bad. We don't need to worry too much about rebuilding the railroad there or anything just yet. But yeah, we've got a mixed force. This makes it look like a really large Bavarian force, but it's not. It's just the Bavarian force is sitting outside the fortress. And we get the combined combat value of all the forces in this region. It looks like the majority of this force is von Benedict's force, and that's fairly substantial. That's basically the 400,000 that just attacked Vienna, and they're sitting at. in Marin looking to get replacements, I guess. But yeah, they're in the process of constructing multiple other forces. So, yeah, I'm going to sit tight for the time being. I think we need to ultimately get Bayezid Pasha's force, open up lines of communication, and drive his force north to Vienna. Give us 3 commands on Vienna. We might even actually be able to clear out Western Hungary using Bayezid Pasha's kind of march. Weather's nice for now, but it's not going to hold, is it? That's the thing. But it might make sense to do that. And we've basically got nothing here. But there's a British force outside Sofia. No way they're going to take Sofia or Salonika, basically. So we kind of got a fortified shield sitting along here. Russian forces in Fiume, sitting tight. Well, one other bit of news, of course fairly predictably, the Austrians have offered peace. They will pay reparations, 149 for 9 years, so they'll pay that each year for 9 years. I mean, we've heard it before. Yeah, we take it and then they go to war with us in 2 years' time. It's nonsense. No, I think we're going to try and push this one home. It's you know, we're not in calm waters yet though. We need to be able to hold Vienna. And that was a lively battle. So, yeah, we'll sit tight for the time being. Going to put you on pause then, past turn, and we'll pick up in late November. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back. Late November, another big round. No big attempt to take Vienna though. It even seems that the Austrian forces have kind of melted away from the fortress at Mara, and they might have sort of pulled back out of view. But yeah, no significant engagement. There are still sort of residual Austrian forces there, but these are fortress troops that were pushed out of Vienna. But it looks like Vienna is now, for the most part, secure. We can't see anything in the immediate vicinity of Vienna that constitutes any kind of threat. So I think now it's in the bag, ready. However, the downside is the supplies of Vienna have now been exhausted. They've been drawn into the army. Hussein Avni was deposited into the fortress. His force is now significantly recovered, but supplies and logistics now has to be organised. Hussein Avni is going to sit outside Vienna. As I say, the supplies in Vienna are exhausted, and we're going to look to try and conduct a link-up. My thinking is on the Drava here. So Bayezid Pasha is, he doesn't have any cavalry forces, but he has 3 corps now, and we're going to conduct an offensive towards Zagreb. The weather has turned, which is the downside. So our forces are going to be moving slower, but we're going to sort of, well, his force is going to move north to Zagreb. It's an 11-day march. That's doable. He's going to conduct an assault, actually, once he gets into Zagreb. And we're going to keep Hussein Avni Pasha outside Vienna in the district to hold the region. Mehmet Ali is going to conduct an assault, 8-day march on Budapest, basically, or Buda, the kind of west bank of the Danube, to try and destroy forces that are sitting outside. There's 2 army corps that are sitting in the district inside the city itself. It looks like well, we already know they're constructing 2 army corps inside. They haven't made too much headway there. One thing that we can note now is you see the bar on the left-hand side is greatly diminished. It looks like there's a little bit of a delay, so there's an opportunity really for the Austrians to kind of take Vienna back, you know, and that's ultimately failed. They kind of get a fortnight or a month, I guess, and they've not managed to do it. So their army morale is now plummeting, and this is where we can do the real damage. First of all, we destroy Austrian forces that are being assembled, and we can now really, my thinking is we can kind of roll roughshod over them now. It feels like it's in the bag. I mean, Mehmet Ali, even in kind of Western Hungary, he can still provide support to Vienna, but he links up. Bear in mind as well that in Budapest there's going to be a huge amount of supplies. Those supplies will be released also to Hussein Avni, but we need to begin to link up really. Bosnia, kind of Bosnia, Zagreb, Western Hungary, and open up a kind of line of communication. And yeah, it's doable. We'll link up on the Drava. And then just keep Hussein Avni holding tight in Vienna. There were fairly significant engagements this last round. So the Austrians, we of course sent Rita Pasha looking to lift the siege at Constanta. That never came to pass. He never even got to Constanza. The Austrians threw everything into Wallachia. They launched a massive offensive, and it failed. So the first engagement then is their advanced force. They're about 100,000. We inflict 27,000. We take 13,000. When I looked at that, I thought, well, the Austrians, it is a defeat, but they're still inflicting, reasonable casualties. They're still kind of conducting themselves like something resembling a professional army. But I think this is probably before their morale has completely collapsed. That's only the first engagement. We, of course, conducted a sortie into the Persian Gulf. In the first engagement, we destroy half of the Omani pirate fleet. Scroll down. The second engagement at Bucharest then is much more substantial. The Austrians are bringing 344,000 men into the field against our force of about 315,000. Again, we absolutely smash them. We destroy 6 elements. We lose one of our own, but we inflict 145,000 casualties on them. We take 60,000 casualties ourselves, which is shade under, and we take 9,600 prisoners. I mean, it's a pretty convincing victory against Giali, and we'll definitely take it. Austrian forces are falling back into Moldavia to kind of lick their wounds. The frustrating thing here, of course, is we can't pursue them into Moldavia. Now, the Russians are starting to get their act together, which is interesting. Before I talk about that, because I'll forget to this otherwise. This is the corps then that lost an element. We can see that because of the chevrons. You see them on the left-hand side. We can see that one of them has this kind of opaque kind of quality to it. So we're going to deposit that core into the fortress. We're going to set the core to passive posture. And, yeah. We capture some supply wagons, incidentally. So we'll keep them in there for the time being. They sustain some damage, but I think we're going to hold our position for the moment. Yeah, do we? No, you know what? I mean, if they just suffered a huge defeat, they suffered like 150,000 casualties. I don't think they're going to move again. And in any case, if we move up to Kronstadt, yeah, we can do this. Let me just check the state of these forces. No, we're going to do this. We're going to conduct an assault against Kronstadt. We're going to try to keep the pressure up. 13 days. It's tough weather. It's quite difficult terrain. We're moving into the Carpathians. But, yeah, so the Russians are starting to get their act together. So, for one, they've passed a partial mobilization. And we're seeing now fairly substantial Russian forces are being deposited into the kind of enclave at Fiume. And they're struggling with supplies by the looks of it. But there was also a fairly large engagement outside Sarajevo, which we received notification of. It's not listed in any of these kind of engagements here. But we can see that our garrison sustained some kind of mild losses. And that was really supporting the Russian forces. Before, can you imagine that? Never thought I'd be saying that at Sarajevo. It looks like a large mixed Russian force, principally comprised of cavalry, engages an Austrian force at Sarajevo. I think we have less to worry about here now. Because of the kind of diminished quality of Austrian forces, the diminished combat worthiness of their forces. There's no way they're going to be taking any of our really well fortified cities. There's a fairly decent British presence, which is really good, in the Balkan Peninsula, which kind of holds our rear, really. So we're going to just be looking north now. We're going to be looking to secure a larger and larger kind of area of sort of the Central Empire. And the more of these victory locations that we control, the faster, if you like, that our kind of victory points clock up, and the more we can bring to the table at the peace conference. We completely ignore the last Austrian offer, and we're going to keep doing that, really. We're going to be sort of dictating the terms of the next peace conference. But yeah, next move is going to be hooking up on the Drava. Now, one really good news, piece of good news, is that Kuwait is now a formal colony of the Ottoman Empire. It's been properly integrated in the Ottoman Empire, and furthermore, the military expedition to pacifying Qatar did come off. It's going to run for 11 turns, but that'll give us an extra 2% colonial penetration. Sometimes it's a little bit variable, I find. Sometimes it's slightly more than that, but it's going to be at least 2%, and that should bump us up to... So it's got a maximum of 50, which is the most that it can push us up to. Changes the so it'll bump it up by 2%, which will give us 48. And then if we manage to play it again, we'll get up to 50, and that's Qatar in the bag, basically. And then we can begin to look at Dubai. I mean, there's 48% already in Dubai. For colonial status, however, I think it has to be an average of Let me just check. So it's going to be an average of 40 and it's at 39. Nothing's ever easy, is it? Gunboat diplomacy, maximum of 25. But there's nothing else we can play. Let's have a look at... we can't push anything to colonial status yet. That's actually because we don't have enough cash though, that's why. Yeah, I need 375. Okay, well, I'll tell you what we are going to do. Let's quickly check on this insurgency, see if it's developed at all. It hasn't. They're just sitting. It's a very small force. They're just sitting in the interior. So let's get the. Let's get the Tripoli division into play, and then we've got a cavalry division. Let's use the railways. Let's get the cavalry division to Sarajevo. Eight days. And then it's only going to be about 5 or 6 days march from Zagreb anyway. So it should be fairly open from Bihać. That's the hope. So that's it really then. The kind of ball and chain of logistics resolved. I can't see, I simply cannot see any way the Austrians can stop this link up on the Drava with the forces that they have. I mean, yeah, unless they rustle something up really significant that's out of view. But again, if you actually look at their forces, we can now see that their morale bar is sunk. They are beginning to construct these army corps, but these forces are going to be much less effective than they have been. There's going to be less staying power, less sustained. They're just not going to be able to kind of press home really serious offensives. And really what we're going to look to do now is to systematically try and destroy the Austrian army piece by piece, methodically, and then broaden our control of all of their major cities, really, and hold this position. And we're looking to hold the position for about a year or so, I think. Expand into central Hungary, maybe Prague, maybe Trieste, but as many victory locations as we can get our kind of mitts on. The good thing is we've got 3 armies in the east, and there's plenty of sort of frontier victory locations that we can look at seizing. So we can begin to press up, take some of these victory locations. The Russians, incidentally, have now conducted a successful offensive into, this is Przemysl, probably pronounced incorrectly, but they've taken Przemysl, and yeah, again, they've mobilized. So the Russians are now bringing serious forces to bear. They kind of pulled their finger out, and at precisely the moment where it's not really required, but anyway, whatever, it's welcome, really. Yeah, I wonder what bearing that'll have. I don't think it'll have too much bearing, because we're not in a formal alliance with Russia, so it doesn't really matter in terms of... so our war score increases by 362. So if we look at peace options, we're not even going to consider peace options yet, but just to see what we might need. Okay, so treaty available, offer peace. It's going to be a case of liberating regions then, isn't it? So for Hungary we need 250 and we're sitting at 60 something. So we're a long way off really. Ruthenia 234. Wallachia. So we can make Wallachia independent, its own kind of principality. We'll see what happens. I mean, our war score will climb much quicker once we control more victory locations, once we control more significant cities. Just sitting in Vienna is going to be the slow way of doing it. Gives us a war score increase of 3 points per turn. 62 now, but it'll climb. It'll begin to climb quicker, I think, once we can control more victory locations. That's it. I'm going to leave it there in late November. I'm going to pass term, conduct economic and admin and stuff like that, and we'll pick up then in early December. And I won't be leaving it 6 days or anything like that. The next video will follow on fairly quickly from this one, so we can kind of begin to track the link up on the Drava and, yeah, begin the process of kind of systematically destroying the Austrian Empire, militarily, piece by piece. So at the very least, even if Hungary ends up being quite a modest area of just sort of modern-day Hungary, destroying the Austrian army and make it very difficult for them to rebuild their army. It'll take a long time, The real hope, though, and my anxiety is that the compromise happens. I'm not sure, I have to check on Wikipedia, but the Austro-Prussian War is 66. That may not come off. There are some things, for example, if they occupy Belgrade, I'm not sure. There are some things that may stop that happening if they tend to have a bit of a focus south and they control certain areas in the south, like maybe Bucharest, which they don't control at the moment, but maybe we might want to try and liberate Belgrade. But then the worry is, if this is a kind of scripted event that fires, Austria immediately folds because they're in no position to fight Prussia, and then the compromise happens. I'm wondering what bearing that has on making Hungary an independent sort of kingdom, keeping in mind that an independent Hungary would have very good relations with us, and if it is the Hungary that I'm thinking it will be, which is quite a large area that controls, the sort of Transylvania also, then this becomes a kind of an economic playground for us, really. It becomes an area that we can exploit, we can develop the region. But the RGOs that we build will remain our own. So long as we have a kind of commerce agreement with them and stuff like that, and good relations, they will be Ottoman. Basically we'll own their economy. So they'll sort of become a kind of de facto sort of protectorate, really, which is what they were during the kind of heyday, really. The kind of classical period and the reform period of the sort of 18th century. But yeah, so I'll leave it there, and we'll pick up in early December. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.